you are listening to Wealth Talks, where we talk about solutions, money, and other things that create wealth in your life. John, we are so delighted to be hosting this podcast today.
We're not in the studio today. We're here live at the Wealth Summit. You're listening as we are here at the Wealth Summit. We're recording this podcast live. You will get to join us for a little portion of the Wealth Summit as people ask questions, and we answer those questions on this episode of Wealth Talks. It's great to be here.
It certainly is. And you know, John, you out there listening today are in for a special treat too, because Michelle's joined us, and Michelle always makes this podcast, I think, more exciting.
Aw, thank you.
So we have some questions from the live audience today that we want to address to you, the listeners out there. So let's start up with the first question, and I think we've got, is it Sam waiting in line there?
Yes.
Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, okay. So one of the questions I like to ask is, first, thank you. This is a wonderful summit we're at. If you're not here, you should have been here.
That's right.
My question is, we had a chance to talk about this before, but I'd like to go over again the 1035 exchange on when you have an existing policy and you're switching it over. And just as a connection to that, when would be a general, what's a general rule when you have your 10% saved and you come into more money? And how is there like a math formula to figure out how should I scale this across different insurance policies?
Very good question. So it's a two-part question, and John, you're going to be taking the second one because he said something about math in it. And Michelle, I'm so glad you're here today because although I know what a 1035 is and we do it all the time, you are the one that does all the paperwork on them usually. So a 1035 is very similar to a real estate 1031 exchange. If you've got a piece of property that you have some equity in and you want to get rid of that property and you want to buy another property without facing a capital gains issue, then you can do what's called a 1031 exchange. It's a piece of paper you file with the IRS, and the equity that comes out of one property then goes directly into the next property without passing through your account, and you don't have to face any gains on that then. In a life insurance policy, that's called a 1035 exchange. So you can take all the equity and all the cost basis that was in the original policy, Sam, and then you can have that roll over to a new policy without it ever passing through your personal account, so there will be no capital gains on it. Michelle, you want to just augment that and tell what you do on the back end of it?
Oh, sure. So when you apply for the policy and you go into underwriting, you sign a piece of paper that says, this is what I want done. I want a 1035 exchange completed. And then once we get an approval from underwriting that you can be underwritten and you accept that offer from the insurance company, then the insurance company writes to the other company and asks them to send the money over. And they will do that, and then it gets attached into your new policy.
So, John, let's take the second half of that question and you tie on to that one.
And I want to say something about the 1035 here real quick, too. Is it always a good thing to do a 1035? Well, it depends on the value of the policies that you're looking to 1035 versus the new policy that you're looking to get.
Exactly.
Is it always a good idea to do a 1031 in real estate? Is it a good idea to do a 1031 from a good property to a bad property? No.
No.
What about from a bad property to a good property? And the same thing goes for doing a 1035 with a life insurance policy.
So
That's
along
right.
with that, John, who knows best on how to advise people about that? Does maybe every life insurance policy owner know what they should be doing, or is that something that we specialize
That's
in
something
helping
that we
them?
help you with. Absolutely.
And the reason we do that is we want you to be able to understand what the implications are. Then it's you that makes the decision. We don't ever make that decision for you at Life Benefits. We just want to educate you so that you can come along and know what's best. Because you know what? We usually find people are pretty smart, don't we, Michelle and John?
We sure do.
Yeah,
Yes,
we do.
absolutely.
And I was just thinking that one of our listeners thought that he needed a 1035 exchange done on his policy. And we looked at his, And really, he thought that because another agent had told him that's what needed to be done.
That's right.
And when we looked at the policy, we said, no, you need to keep this one. It's a good one. You know, don't let someone talk you out of your good property. And that's really what a life insurance policy is. It's a
Right,
property, it's an asset.
And what was probably going on there, you know? The insurance agent, when he does the 1035, gets a commission on it. So he was probably wanting to get that value transferred over, even if it wasn't in the client's best interest.
So
Well,
what
that
you're sa-
happens with real estate too.
It
because,
does.
you know, all the time we
Yes.
get a postcard in the mail, we would like to sell your home. We know someone who wants to buy it. Well, if you really check into that, chances are they don't know the name of the person. They're just really trying to make a sale. Okay.
Yeah. All right, so the second part of the question, I'm going to go ahead and repeat it here very quickly. The 10-20-70. As that grows was the question, what's the math behind how the percentages change? Is that the question? Yes. Yep, that's the question. So we talk about the 10-20-70 being a guideline. It's not a rule that we have to follow.
Well, we call it a rule, but it's
but
really
it's
a guideline.
That's right. So it does not have to stay. You want to at least be saving 10%. If you don't have any creditors, you can save 30%. If your living expenses, you know, as your income rises, you may not need 70% for lifestyle. Maybe you do want to increase the amount you're saving to 40, 50%. If that's comfortable for you, absolutely, you can do that. Math, it's not really a math question necessarily at that point, but moving on to the next part of your question, how does it then, do we need to look at diversifying that into multiple policies with multiple different insurance companies? Well, insurance is already somewhat diversified. You want to talk about how the insurance companies work, how they back each other up?
Certainly, every insurance company that is out there that you can buy an insurance policy from has reinsurers. They're the people that are actually standing behind the company that you're buying your policy from, saying that that policy can be a contract with you. So if that company that you're buying your policy from doesn't manage money very well, and maybe they go insolvent. And I say that because an insurance company in the United States cannot go bankrupt. So you know that you're protected from a company bankrupting on you if you own a policy with them. Then if they're insolvent, the insurance commissioner of the state that you bought your policy will come in and tell that insurance company what it needs to do. It's going to first see if someone would give them some money, or could they reorganize the CEO, the CFO of the company and get it solvent really quick. Or maybe one of the reinsurers would like to give that company that you bought your policy a chunk of capital so they become liquid again. Or maybe the commissioner says this is just beyond hope, like they did with AIG in 2008.
Yeah, that's a recent example.
Yes.
Well, recent, 10 years ago, but really 10 years ago. That wasn't very long ago.
And interestingly enough, it was not the insurance side of AIG that it went under.
That's right, it was their
It was the
banking
banking
division.
side.
Nobody lost any money in that deal, though, on the insurance side, because all that happened is the reinsurers absorbed the cost of what they were already liable for. And so that's the way insurance is structured. It's structured so well that you already have insurance on your insurance just by buying an insurance policy. That's kind of cool, isn't it? So
So, of course, we want to buy policies with companies that are paying a dividend, that are managing, that are making a profit, that aren't having to go to their reinsurers for a bailout. Okay? But if it does happen, it's nice to know that it's backed up even when we just have one policy. And,
Yes.
of course, there's nothing wrong with owning policies with multiple companies. In fact, that was one of the strategies that we talked about when we were talking about retirement and passive income. You do want to have multiple policies when you get to that stage in the game because it gives you more options for passive income.
So diversification, we've always heard, is a protection, right? That it's a protection of your money. But Warren Buffett reminds you that diversification is for people who don't know what they're doing. You know, remember John gave the rules that Warren Buffett says we buy and hold forever. So once you buy a
was Ben.
policy, you don't have to worry about, oh, what should I do with this if the policy was designed right in the first place. You are with the best company that you could be with. And the longer you have that policy, the better it's going to get for you.
Good,
All
good.
right.
And I saw that we have a question from Mark. Mark, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks. My question is, so I own several policies, but I'm just not comfortable taking a loan. And can I take more than one loan from those policies?
Very good question. John, you want to tackle that one?
Yep. And I know you've taken more than one loan from your policies, Mark.
So I think
you know how,
he was.
you know a little bit how this works, right?
So I think he was doing this, bringing up this question for the sake of our listeners, because some of our listeners out there have that very same question, and Mark knows that, so he's bringing it up so that it can be answered today.
That's right.
Thanks, Mark.
So maybe
Yes.
you have more than one policy loan from your policy. Did you do the right thing? John, let's talk about it.
Yes, absolutely. The insurance company only sees that you have one loan out in the policy. They have a certain amount. So let's say that you have $10,000 available. If you take out $2,000, then $2,000, then $2,000, then $2,000, doesn't matter to the insurance company. They just see you had $2,000, then $4,000, then $6,000, then $8,000. Doesn't really matter to them. It's how we track it on our end. Great question, Mark. Thank
It's
you.
kind of like a line of credit. If you
It
have
is.
a line of credit at your bank, you might have a limit of 50,000, and you can take a loan against that, and you can pay some of it back, and you can take it out again, and the bank keeps track of what your balance is and how much interest you owe based on that. Insurance company does the same thing. Very similar.
Very similar to your credit card. You might go to Nordstrom today and buy a suit, and then you don't go down the mall and you might buy a pair of shoes. Oh, you just increased your loan balance. You didn't have two loans. And so it just accumulates on there. And of course, you have a credit limit on your credit card, right? And so you can't ever exceed your credit line. And really all the credit card wants from you is the minimal payment on that. And so, but if you recover and put more than the minimal payment in there, then you restored your credit line, didn't you? So a policy loan looks very similar to that. You're working with X amount of credit, your equity or cash value in the policy that you can borrow from. And as you use that, it adds up, but it's still just one policy loan. Next question. We got
Dr.
someone-
Chris.
First of all, let me say we're very grateful to be here. It's been a wonderful weekend. I just have a general question, not so much about competition, about what you do compared to other people who say similar things. There's a lot of advice for us out there. It's very confusing. For many, many years, I've been told you've got to get out of debt. And you just have to chase debt deliberately to be out of debt. And there was not always then what. Not to mention anybody's name, but there are radio shows and guys teaching things. I think in terms of my colleagues, my family, and my friends, they're pursuing this idea. So for me to be able to articulate what I'm doing, what is the bigger idea than just being out of debt?
Wow.
I'll go ahead and say the name.
Yeah, we're
Dave
not
Ramsey.
Yeah, I'm talking about Dave Ramsey. I didn't want to bring up anybody's name.
And there are others, yes. We know who you're talking about, yes.
We know
Great
those
question.
people. So do our listeners.
And I want to address that for you because I'm a perfect example of following Dave Ramsey's program. I went through school without any debt. I paid cash, I worked nights, I worked weekends. Sometimes I was so sleepy working graveyards that I would sleep through my morning classes on Monday morning. Fortunately, I had good friends that took notes for me, all right? But I worked because I didn't want to owe anybody anything, and I didn't. Michelle and I bought our first house. We paid it off in 5 years, okay? We bought our second house with a check. I remember writing that check and thinking, yeah, I have won the game, the Dave Ramsey game. I beat it. Susie Orman, whoever you want to talk about that says, oh, pay your house off, have no debt. We didn't have debt. We drove our cars until they were dead, okay? And then we bought a used one. That is not freedom. That is not financial freedom. That is financial slavery. Only when I realize that Jesus himself said, at least you could have put my money on loan with the bankers, and the interest that belonged to me would have been in when I got back. Did I realize that being out of debt was not a Christian value? Now, if debt's got me, I'm in trouble. But if I am managing debt, that's the way that wealth is created. Now, Jesus also tells a story in Luke 16, if you want to read it, about an individual that came along, and he was so shrewd that he managed his master's finance in a way that saved his neck. And Jesus said, the children of this age are more shrewd than the children of light. Folks, that wasn't a compliment to those of us who believe in God that don't know how to manage money. And so I found out it was my responsibility to manage money in the system that I live in. And guess what? If all the money in America disappeared today, if all the debt in America disappeared today, there would be no money, because our money is based on debt. So debt is the situation that we live in. We have to learn to manage it, because that's what our money is based on. It's no longer based on any set standard like gold or even the price of oil. It's based on our debt. And so if we get rid of all of our debt, we have no ability to create wealth.
So here, I'm the one that kind of brings like a practical aspect to this, and I like to jump to another subject that we understand and then come back and apply it to the same situation. So I'm going to talk about getting in better physical shape by losing weight. How do we lose weight? Exercise. I'll lose the weight first, then I'll start exercising. How about eating healthy? Well, let me lose the weight first, then I'll start eating healthy. No, we can't wait like that. We got to do it all simultaneously. And rather than trying to get out of debt first, hey, let's work on protecting ourselves, saving, getting out of debt, and building wealth all at the same time. That's what this is all about, wealth talks. And we can do that through this method of the Perpetual Wealth Code. And that's what's very exciting about not just having to go on a debt diet.
One other thing about debt. When I wrote that check for our second house, I thought I'd won. You don't win when you pay your house off. The house doesn't belong to you. If you don't pay your taxes, guess who comes and takes it from you? We don't own anything in this world. We're just stewards. And we need to learn to be better stewards of it, because it's not our money in the first place. Next question, please.
Question from
Caesar.
Thank you,
Caesar.
Caesar.
All right.
So I'm a first-time attendee. Blown my mind, this whole Wealth Summit. So thank you.
Blow
for
your
putting
mind
it
in
on.
a good way?
In a good way.
All right.
So my question is, do you work with policies from Canada or in Canada, or do you work with foreign clients?
Good question.
Yes and no. So let's talk about that. Okay, we used to be able to underwrite people and get them policies that were out of the country or
Foreign nationals.
foreign nationals, like in Canada, especially Canadian citizens. But then something happened in 9/11 that changed the rules. The Patriot Act came in, and because money laundering is such an issue with terrorism in the world today, there were some regulations on insurance and banking and money transactions that made that more difficult. I will be happy to tell you that we have clients all over the world, however, and that now that we have an administration that is taking a little bit stronger stance against terrorism, we're also seeing some of those regulations being eased, and the insurance companies have told us they are looking again at making it possible to do that in the future. Now, the no part is we have friends in Canada that can help you, because Canada and America are the only two countries left that have mutual participating whole life insurance. Thank you for your question. Next question.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to be on your podcast. I have a question.
And this question is from Tom.
Thank you. I'm Tom.
To Tom.
Appreciate everything that we're learning. I really like the out-of-the-box thinking. You guys know I have a number of children, as do you. College is on the horizon for my children, and while mom and dad can assist to a certain level, I want to think like let's talk about maybe looking at this from a fresh perspective from what you guys are teaching. So outside of grants and scholarships, what are some ways that we can start thinking differently when it comes to funding college for our children?
Oh, I was just recently on Fox 5 here in Las Vegas talking about that very subject, Tom. Thank you for bringing that up. You have a lot of options when you start thinking about your children's education. I told my kids that I'm not funding their education because I have 2 doctorate degrees. Those doctorate degrees did not help me to get wealthy. Now, if your passion is to be a doctor, if your passion is to be an attorney, if your passion is to be a CPA or some professional engineer, that you have to have letters behind your name, then you can borrow from my life insurance policy to go to school. So far, John, you were the first one
Chose
to turn
not
me
to.
down. Okay. Now that doesn't
Ben
mean...
calls himself a college opt-out.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're doing quite well because they learned that they could make, and they don't need the skills that a college would teach them to do their occupation. But if your passion is for something that needs a degree, a school teacher, whatever it is, that you have to have that certification, the best thing as parents that we can do for our kids is start buying life insurance on ourselves. On ourselves, because it's very difficult to get enough cash value in a child's policy just because of the restrictions on how a child's policy has to be funded, Tom, for us to have enough money to help them to go to school. But we can get that amount on our life. Now, if your child knows that they're responsible for their education, then they can borrow that money to go to school from mom and dad. We can take it out of our policy, and guess what? Mom and dad are probably going to be a little bit more forgiving on the payments on having that paid back, aren't we, Michelle?
I think so.
Yeah, okay. And so we can give them a longer term to pay it back with a higher interest rate. So they then get to help us in our retirement because that interest is coming to us. And that brings in a family unity that wouldn't be there otherwise. The other thing that really helps is that mom and dads usually die before kids do. And they're going to get every dime back they paid for us and for their education when I die, and a lot more money. And if they have done real well, and I tell all my kids this, and John can attest to this, if I give you a loan and you don't pay me back, you're not borrowing from me again. All right? So we teach not only loyalty, we teach responsibility. And we've been able to give our children loans for other things that they're interested in doing to help them get going in life. And it's a cool thing to happen because it builds a family strength there that isn't there otherwise.
So the sooner you start getting money into your life insurance, the more you'll have accumulated for your children to borrow for college expenses. And then another thing, say you haven't started as soon as you would have liked to. Of course, there's other options to brainstorm and to think about. And realize all the money that you have in your life insurance policy, you don't have to show that money when you go to apply for grants. So that's a
right,
positive thing.
John.
And I'd like to give you a perspective now from the child standpoint. You ready? Okay. So I have a few thoughts going around in my mind. First of all, when I graduated from high school, okay, got my diploma, went down to the local college, took the placement test. I did very well. I thought I might, take a course in business and economics starting out, but I wasn't really sure. I wouldn't necessarily, if I was going back to do that today, I probably wouldn't take those. So how many kids are going off to college today, getting a degree in something that they don't end up using in their life that didn't really make it better?
Or changing their major halfway through or a year through and then spending more time in college than they would have.
I can only imagine. I mean, that would have been me.
Yeah.
I'm glad it wasn't. I would have had a load of debt.
Yeah.
Whether it's to mom and dad's policies or whether it's to the banks. But here's what we have done. we recognize that even if we're not going to college, education is still very, very important. We didn't stop learning.
So you started educating
continued-
yourselves
Continued learning
in the areas you needed to learn and
in
to-
software
Uh-huh.
that we've developed, in some of the marketing efforts that we have put into our business, some of the things that you see the results of today.
Well, and
You don't
even on the
necessarily
podcast,
see-
the
even
results
on
on
the
the podcast.
podcast.
We wouldn't
So-
be able to reach out to all these people that we reach out to if you hadn't educated yourself on
Certainly.
how to get this message out.
Certainly.
And as
So-
they become partners in our business, then we can provide education to them as partners in our business, and that's a tax deduction for our corporation.
That's been wonderful too. You know, you have to look too at the cost of a college education. It's gone up astronomically compared to the cost of wages. It's inflated right now. Now, if I ever need to go to college to get a degree for something I want to do in the future, fine, I'll go back and get it then. And I'll know what I need it for. I have a practical application to put it to work right then. I don't look back on the decision not to go to college as a bad decision. I look back on it as a very good one.
So some other options are, if your child is thinking about college and they're really maybe excited about animal husbandry, they want to get a degree in animal husbandry, have them go work for a vet or go work on a farm for a while, get paid to find out if that's really what they want to do for the rest of their life. It doesn't matter if you wait a year or two to start college. It sure makes a difference, though, if you go to college 2 years or a year, 3 years, and say, I'm really not interested in this. You see, you might as well get paid what you think you're interested in. And you may find out that you don't need that degree, but if you do, now you know how to get it, and maybe that employer will find you so valuable they'll even pay for your education.
Yeah. Shall we take one more question?
Let's do
Real
it.
quick.
Oh, one more question.
Thanks for it's really nice coming to the Wealth Summit. So I'm coming for the first time, but I'm from accounting background, so I have some small quick question. Like today's morning, when we were doing the sheet for taking a $2,000 loan, and we were using using for the expenses. But if I see the income account for $2,000 when we were writing it off, so if you take the money, the loans which we are paying out to the money manager account, end of day it's still $2,000 minus $100 we are paying for the interest. So it's just from taking from one pocket going to the other pocket, but end result is still $1,900 instead of, because we are using money for the expense, not for any investment. So I'm a bit confused on that aspect.
Okay, John, do you want to take that, or do you want me to tackle it first?
Yeah, you tackle it first.
Okay, first of all, you're absolutely right, Bobby. The loan is not paid off after the first year. We've put $1,200 back, but we have freed up $800 of cash flow. Now, the next year, if we borrow more money from the policy, okay, and we use that money for an expense, then that's going to free up income that we would have had to pay for that expense or investment as well, wouldn't it? So now, when we make payments for the second year, we're going to have to pay another $1,200 on that first year's loan, correct? And then we've got to pay on the second loan too. Well, the second loan might be good to keep for 2 years. It might be good to keep for 3, 4, 5 years. We're in control of that now. And so many people have said, really all we're doing is forcing people to save here. Do you see how that would be true? Because what's happening is we're ending up paying more interest than what we would if we would have paid cash. And the only way that this makes sense is the fact that if we would have paid cash, we would have lost the interest on that growth, on that money that we could have made it grow at.
So this question
It's all about
came
the
on a
timing.
specific example we did this morning here at the Wealth Summit, showing the cash flow of taking a policy loan and how to pay it back. And it was a specific amount that we did, and we were looking at how that cash flow looked. That was a great
That's right.
example this morning.
And you go through an example around this on another video that we have on YouTube.
Yes.
So for the benefit of those of you who were listening, who were not at the Wealth Summit, I'm going to go ahead and include that video as a resource link when we release this podcast.
And besides that, this whole Wealth Summit is being recorded, and it will be available, in about 6 to 8 weeks for purchase. So that'll
That's
be
right.
on the website as well.
That's right, life-benefits.com. Anything else you want to close with?
Well, just one last thing about this last question you heard. What if the second loan that you took from that policy was not something that you were using for expenses, but was an investment that was giving you 12 or 14 or 10% rate of return. Now who's making that payment for you? And because maybe we only put, $5,000 toward that investment, we still have enough cash flow to create so that we can continue to pay ourselves that high rate of interest that we set out on the first loan. It's just like credit card companies work. You make that payment comfortable and affordable for you, but instead of paying the credit card company back, you're paying yourself back. It is a forced way to save if we're only using it for expenses, but in the United States, Bobby, when you get to deduct the interest on that loan if it was for a business or investment purpose. So there still is an advantage, like Jack Cohen was saying today. John, it's been
We're
great
ready to
again.
wind up.
And we always love it when you're here with us, Michelle. And
Thank you. And
this
we-
audience has been wonderful. And we will be back next time
Yes,
where we
that's
talk
right.
about
You are listening to Wealth Talks, where we talk about solutions, money, and other things that create wealth in your life. We'll be back here next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.